Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Miroslav Petrovic. He's a TEDx speaker, an author, and he's the founder of the Enlivened Speaking Institute. Welcome to the show, Miroslav.
Thank you for having me, KAJ. Good to be here.
You are welcome to the show. You are welcome to India, Miroslav, in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll be talking about authentic communication and leadership. So, first, to understand, Miroslav, is we know about communication, but what is authentic communication? Help us understand in today's time. Is authentic communication possible in today's time? First, let's understand this concept itself.
Yeah, this is a great question, KAJ. I think it is possible. I also think it's very scary for a lot of us because a lot of what we do with our communication and social lives is more about holding a mask or a persona, or really about feeling safe. We find an algorithm which helps us keep safe, and then we tend to hang out in that algorithm. And for me, authentic communication asks us to be just that, authentic. And often what authenticity wants to do is break the algorithm. Like, it's looking for life, it's looking for expression, it's looking for, the desire, the passion, the goals we have to be pursued. And that isn't going to look like the way we've been communicating up until now. It's going to ask us to express parts of ourselves we'd never have in the past.
Right. So, is it only a good word, or is it possible? Where is it possible? Is it in our lives? Is it in our office? Is it easy for leadership? Because a lot of times we hear them talking about so many great things, even communication, openness, transparency, all those things. And the biggest requirement for authentic communication is, that you are true to yourself, you are true to other people, within the organization. But you see, the first day they speak something else, that you are my family. The second day you hand over the pink slips and you block their entry to the company itself. So how do you see this sort of leadership vis-a-vis the authentic communication and leadership that we are talking about?
Yeah, look, one thing I really found, so I think authentic communication can exist in any organization, whether that's a family or a company organization. But I think the big piece we have to unpack here is around culture. If you want to be authentic in a culture that's not based in authenticity, that's probably not going to get very far. Like, you would have to have a leadership position to funnel that from the top down for that to have any chance of surviving. Otherwise, your culture of authentic leadership is fighting against a much bigger system, and a system that might not be interested in that as a culture. So, I mean, in an organization, or in a family, you can call this enrollment. Can you enroll people into a culture which, if it hasn't been authentic, becomes more authentic? And again, if you're in a family, it's going to depend what position you're in to begin with. If you're a child trying to bring this in, it's a lot trickier than if you're already an adult that holds power in that organization and you're modeling healthy, authentic communication. Like, it's going to become the norm within the family. And I think it's pretty similar when it comes to bigger organizations. Save maybe an example where you're stepping into a company and taking a leadership position, be that, any kind of C-suite role. Now it's like you have power, but then it's a matter of enrolling all the people within that organization for them to see authenticity, openness, win-win kind of lifestyle as beneficial for everyone within the organization.
Right. So let's look at this authentic communication in two aspects. One is the organizational aspect, and one is the personal aspect. How possible is it to have, even in personal life nowadays, we find one of the big requirements of authentic communication is you can have difficult conversations very openly and very easily. Now, even in personal life, in many cases you'll find that everything is okay, but difficult conversations can be really difficult. Even in organizations, everyone is facing this. The juniors employees are facing this difficulty, because they think that if we bring up certain issues, they might get fired earlier than what their destiny is. And for leaders also, many leaders, I've talked to many guests, They say leaders find it very difficult to have difficult conversations with employees because they might be taken otherwise. Even so, everything is now under question. Amidst
Mm.
all things, people use the words like you are judging me, you are doing this, you are raising question over my individuality, my so many things. Everything is under question. So how do you manage and look at being authentic, in and still want to come out as somebody who is balancing the realities of life in today's time?
Yeah, you asked some really good questions, Kaj. I remember at one point I was working in an organization, and my superior, she pulled me over for a meeting. There was a lot of changes in the company. She was telling me the things that she was telling me, and I was sitting there, and the feeling inside of me is like, she's just saying this because she has to say this. And for me as an employee, I was like, I didn't join this company to live like this, to be inside of these sets of values that she's bringing me, but she's not even like choosing to do this. Her role has dictated she has to pass this on to the rest of the team. And it was one of those difficult conversation moments. I'm like, I'm either going to sell out my own soul, and like the reason why I'm with this company, or I'm going to have to be authentic with her. And I'll get to what supports us to do this, but the conversation inside of me was like, look, let's call her Josephine. I said, look, Josephine, I hear where you're coming from, and I feel like I have to separate two things right now. As a person, I love you. I love who you are. I love what you're about. I love the relationship we have as work colleagues. But what you're being asked to do on behalf of this company, I don't really stand by or support. The way you're communicating with me and what you've been asked to say for me, it's like that doesn't really land for me, and it's not the culture that I was brought into when I joined this company. So it's like it's separating the content from the person, so there's less possibility for her to take it personally. And actually, I remember when both of us stopped working for this company sometime later, she contacted me and said something like, you were the only person or one of the only people that was authentic with me during this time. And I just want to express to you that I really appreciated that. So it's like there's this capacity to meet and connect in the personal, even when it's tricky. And you asked something as well. Is there something good you said in the card? It's like, how do we grow, or how do we develop the confidence and the capacity to have these conversations? And for me, one of the biggest gifts has actually been meditation. It's like it's recognizing how can we take this stuff less personally? How can we develop a sense of resilience inside ourselves and recognize that someone else's opinion or experience doesn't actually mean anything about us? Like it might, and it might raise emotion. And there's just like in meditation, it's like, okay, can I take a few breaths before I respond on impulse? You're nodding your head, so this feels very familiar to you. I see as well.
No, I'm also nodding because you started it very early in life at the age of 18, and then the life changed for you. So I'm just trying to, go back several years back and try to understand the 18-year Miroslav, doing meditation and discovering himself. That's why I'm smiling and nodding.
Lovely.
Right. So let's look at communication. A lot of time people, look at communication as something as a survival technique. That whatever be in Rome as the Romans do, what the leaders want to hear, because you got to get your work done. I want to understand Miroslav, coming from a war-torn Yugoslavia at the age of 5 into Australia, and then living the life here. Life can make you, adjust to situations and speak only the language that is people want to hear. How did you learn the language of authentic communication in your life, and now you are teaching that to others? Why was it about adjustment, or was it about again being authentic? I want to understand a bit through the journey of your life.
Yeah, I would say the way I grew up was very much people pleasing. So saying the right thing at the right time, or most of the time not saying anything. If you don't have an opinion and you never say anything, it's really easy to get along with people. So, and not that I was trying to do that, but I just had extreme social anxiety and I didn't really speak much when I was younger. So it meant like, socially, it was very awkward and uncomfortable for me for most of my life. And it's been, over a decade long process of undoing those patterns of just trying to belong and recognizing that as I express myself, some people might not like it, but if I don't, I'm pretending to be someone I'm not as well, which like I find after a while it just becomes impossible for anyone. It's like we'd rather risk not belonging than belonging under the guise of who we're not really. And for me, there's something beautiful as well here, KAJ. Like we don't choose who we are, you know? Like on some level, we have some choice of capacity, but my deepest desires and the way life has unfolded, I have so much control and so much has just happened. And like when desires show up, sometimes I'm like, I didn't even know I desired this thing. But now as the desire's up, all I can do is act on it and give it freedom to move through me. So I think what you're asking me around authentic communication, it just got to the point where I'm like, I have to start saying this. And the purpose of my meditation felt like it stripped away a few layers so I could start expressing myself and holding, you know, my soul or my own sense of self as more important than what other people thought of me.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. So a lot of people who struggle with all these things, struggle with leadership, struggle with every other aspect of life. How can they provide this authentic self leadership to themselves? How is it that, when adversities come, when say layoffs happen, when different things happen at the same time, how can they look at life? Why I ask this is a lot of people, are speakers today, motivational speakers, and one gets to listen to all those things. Even one doesn't know whether the speaker is has ever faced those difficulties in life, and so it might just be sounding great in terms of listening to that, but many a times it sounds hollow when you actually try and implement those things in your life. So, how does an individual look at the present realities of life and listen to all those voices which talk about being authentic? I want to see both the sides of life, and both as a listener, and I'll come to the speaker's part after this.
Okay, let me see if I can respond to this. And you can tell me if you need me to refine my answer. So, what I realized was it was more about being authentic to myself and the self that I didn't know I was, like a deeper truth in my own identity. And a lot of the wisdom that actually hit me really deeply came from India. So it's interesting you're calling from India as we have this call. There's a quote in the Bhagavad Gita, and I might be paraphrasing here, but it says something like act for action's sake and be unattached to the fruits of your actions. And authentic communication for me was really that. It's like the desire here is for this to be expressed. I can't control how the other side is going to respond to it. Whether I'm asking for a raise, whether I'm asking a girl to go on a date with me, whether I'm, well, like whatever the context is, it's like all I can be true on is that these words want to be expressed, and can I let life deal with the rest? If I get rejected, can I just breathe in and be with the rejection? If I get a raise, good, I've opened up another opportunity. But the purpose wasn't the external gratification. The purpose was like really that sense of when Ayuna finds himself on the battlefield and it's like, oh, this is your service right now. And the service for all of us in our life is likely not going to show up as a battlefield. It's going to be all these small moments in life where it's like, are you willing to be true to who you are, to your soul, to your deepest desires and intentions? Or are you just going to pretend and play along, with what life has expected of you?
Wonderful, wonderful, Miroslav. You have answered that beautifully by talking about the lines from Bhagavad Gita. You have told, but that was Lord Krishna speaking in the
Yes.
battlefield to the great warrior Arjuna, and he was speaking with utmost conviction because he was God himself. But for lesser mortals, who want to be speakers in life, they speak on so many things as per their audiences, and speaking is now becoming a big tool in today's time. You are also the founder of Enlivened Speaking Institute, will understand about that too. So in terms of a speaker, how can you be authentic when your audience is always very different, and all the time you have to you have to uh, work out your speaking schedule, speaking motivation, speaking everything as per the audience. I want to understand, then it's a big challenge for speakers. Should the can the speaker be authentic in different settings, whereas he has a limited capacity? And also the audience, how can they understand in terms of the authentic communication that the speaker is wanting to make? Will that actually work on the audience? I want to understand about this speaking part of today's time, because Lord was one, he was speaking only what was right. But when the speaker is speaking to different audiences, as per the different settings, the speaker may sound not authentic. I want to understand that.
I hear you here. I would, in all my experience of working with different audiences, authenticity changes based on who we're speaking to, and what we might say in front of one audience could be completely wrong to say in front of another. So for me, like, life is primarily about relationships, and authentic communication is not about being an idiot and just like what I call just living in sovereignty. This is my truth. I don't care whether you like it or not. Take it. It's more about how can we move together towards a common goal that's useful for both of us. And this is where, in a room of professionals, how you're going to communicate authentically is going to be very different than if you're speaking to a room of couples. And what's going to be considered okay and feasible and useful is going to be very different. Like, you wouldn't broach on personal relating issues when you're speaking in front of an organization. This wouldn't be relevant. Even if that's authentically what's going on in your life, it's like it's not going to support the reason and the cause you've been brought to speak on that stage. Whereas hanging out and just being professional and not going into that space, if you were speaking, I don't know, at a relating conference or something, it's like it wouldn't be fully authentic because you haven't let yourself be vulnerable enough to communicate what really needs to be communicated. And for me, it's like every stage presents a different kind of challenge or invitation for what parts of ourselves can we connect to that actually want to be expressed here.
Right.
Does that
So
help
you have
answer
answered.
your thinking, Kaj?
Yes. Yes. You have answered that well. You are a good speaker, I must tell you. And so let's talk about speaking. Speaking has come out as a big tool. So help us understand. You talk about speaking as a big number one tool for success. For those people who want to look at speaking, who have got the gift of the gab, and those who haven't but want to use speaking as a tool, how can they do that? How should they look at speaking as a tool which can lead them to success?
Yeah. So firstly, how to do it is recognize that why people don't speak is because of fear. And the people that do speak are usually ones that take on leadership positions, that build big businesses because they're willing to be seen, they're willing to brave and step through those thresholds most people are afraid of. Being seen, being judged, leadership, all of these things. How to do it if you don't have a natural gift of the gab is recognize that fear and the story is two different things. So the fear that you feel in your body and the story you tell yourself about that fear, it's two separate things. There were studies that were done, and I go into more detail on this in the book I wrote on Tibetan monks, and they found the main difference between Tibetan monks and the everyday person was for Tibetan monks, when they would feel a sensation, let's say fear, the amount of time it took between them feeling that and making a story about it, saying that because I'm feeling this, it means X, Y, Z on stage. This wasn't part of that study, but as an example for the audience, on stage, it's like, they're going to judge me. I have nothing to say. I'm not confident enough. That's making stories about the sensations in your body. The main difference between the monks and the everyday person was the lapse of time between the data showing up in the body and that being turned into a narrative was a lot bigger than the everyday person. In the everyday person, that kind of happens instantly. We don't even realize there's a relationship between the data and the story, and that might be a program that was written a long time ago and isn't actually effective. So I say to people when they're starting off, find smaller stages where it's not going to risk your career, or you're not going to risk some big thing, like go to an open mic night or stand-up poetry, or give a talk at a local community council thing, just so you can start dissolving the fear, just so you can get comfortable getting up there and being yourself and discovering who you are on stage. Because it's like, recognize it's a process and it's best done where there's no pressure. You don't want to start this when you have a big keynote coming up in a month. Like, it's too late. It's like a professional soccer player. It's like, yes, they've got a game. They're playing and rehearsing like regularly for the moment that they're going to get out onto the pitch. I think that answered half your question.
Yes, you have answered. Let's ask another question, which will cover anything if we have left behind. That is about your institute. You are Enlivened Speaking Institute. Tell us a bit about that. Secondly, you have written this book, Give Them Goosebumps. Help us understand what have you dealt in this book? How can people learn about, owning the stage of communication through this?
Yeah, this is great. So firstly, the first half is about my own journey, going from being stuttering. People used to think I was mute, speaking very little, up until I discovered meditation, and meditation was my launching pad for speaking more. It was more of a dharma, you could call it, as opposed to something I ever envisioned myself doing. So that's the first half of the book. The second half of the book is some research I wrote here at Monash University, which is Australia's leading education university. And I wrote a thesis on the topic of utilizing embodied presence as a tool as a pedagogical approach. So basically how it affects people when we're more present inside our bodies, when we're teaching, speaking, facilitating, etc. Originally, I'd done it more in a yoga context when I did the research, but it really applies to any kind of stage. And I give the 3 main principles. It's kind of 3 plus 1. So you could say the 4 main principles of really being more authentic on stage to create more connection with the people you're working with. The Institute is all about teaching that work. So it's looking at stripping away the layers. So even if you haven't prepared anything, you're just ready to go the moment you step on stage. The old school model that, at least that I was taught here in Australia in high school, what they used to teach us for public speaking was, you memorize your talk, you speak in front of your friends, you do more memorization, then you're reciting a talk. You're not really speaking when you're on stage. Whereas my approach was more about, let's start with authenticity. Let's start with who you are. Let's start with you being comfortable, even if you have nothing to say. So it's like your nervous system knows what to do if you go blank. And then we build the layers up from there. Who's the message? What's the audience? Where do you want them to be after the talk? But even if you miss something that you've prepared, it doesn't matter because you're comfortable with the silence.
Absolutely. There is much to learn about speaking. There is much to learn about communication. There is much to learn about leadership from you, Miroslav. So for those people who want to know about you, learn from you, and get the best of you, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Probably best to connect on social media. The Miroslav Experience on Instagram, Miroslav Petrovic on Facebook, LinkedIn. Reach out, say hi, tell me you listened to this interview we just did with KAJ Masterclass. Otherwise, miroslavp.com, miroslavp.com is my website, and the enlivenedspeakinginstitute.com is the institute website.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, KAJ.